City of Stevens Point Board of Public Works Committee meeting, recorded April 12, 2021.
Thank you. And I will call the Board of Public Works to order at 7:16. Either Director Badoon, I don't see, there's Trish. Trish, could you please call the roll?
I sure will. Mayor Wiesa.
Here.
Alder Slawinski.
Here.
Alder Kneebone.
Here.
Corey Laddick.
Here.
Alder Jennings.
Here.
And then Morrow and Zarazua are excused, correct?
That is correct. Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Before we move on to the director's report, I want to say it was requested that we provide a TDS update. I will do that at council. I don't have enough details, in my opinion, regarding the landscaper schedule to bring that forward. So I'll give you an update on the TDS progress at council. Director's report is item number 1 on the agenda. Director, want to summarize?
Yes, a couple of things here. First, Stanley Street and North Point Drive intersection. Really, all I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that it is otherwise back after a bit of pestering with the DOT. They finally responded after, I believe, a little over a year to get some comments back to us. So now sending those comments to AECom to hopefully wrap up their report and get some final recommendations from them. So we should be seeing that in the coming months. Second, Clover River Crossing Trail. Director Kramer and I just recently met with Rettler and their team to go over where we are. There was some good things that came out of the geotechnical report, also some unfortunate things as well. So they're working on some of the design there to try to find out what we can otherwise do. Some of the loading for the soils isn't as good as we were hoping it would be, but yet understandable given the area of the river bottom that we're working in, that was a possibility. As well as just kind of looking at the vertical and horizontal alignment of the trail for any of the environmental impacts, as well as to meet the design criteria for bike paths, shared use paths, and ADA requirements. So things are moving along, and that too, we should probably have an updated concept to present here in the next month or so.
Thank you very much, Director. Any comments regarding either of those two items or questions? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the report and place it on file.
Mayor, I have
So moved. Sorry.
It's all right.
Let's go to Alder Kneebone first.
Well, I'll second Alder Slawinski's motion, but
Thank you.
I don't know if it's appropriate to ask a question about, I see the alley improvement project is listed in the report. Quick
Actually,
update on that or
Another
not?
person, I would ask that you call the director in the morning for an update on that. As our city attorney would tell you, the items listed need to be pretty specific. So we have a motion and a second to accept the director's report and place it on file. Any discussion there? Hearing none, all those in favor, unmute yourselves, please, and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, do the same. And that is approved. Item number 2 is to award the 2021 Street Improvements Project 21-01 to Gerke Excavating, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $7,175,149.71. Director.
Yes, this is, of course, our big street reconstruct project, and this one is bigger than many that we've had in the past, especially with some of the utility components in there. As I had mentioned in some of the previous meetings, that this project is to help alleviate some of the flooding that had been persistent on the north side. So there's a lot of stormwater components within this. So the price tag reflects that size of the project, but yet well below what the engineer's estimate was for the project. We did spend a fair amount of time. We had the bid opening some weeks ago to allow ourselves time to review whoever the apparent low bidder was, to be comfortable with them, realizing the numbers that we're talking about. And we did a lot of research with Gerke on their projects, their resources, both staff and equipment, past history of projects and their capability to do that, and feel that they can do this work. So we do feel that they are responsible and like to award the, would like to award the contract to Gerke. In addition, I know the Water and Sewage Commission also took action on this item today at their commission meeting and did approve the award for Gerke as well. So if there are any questions, I'll take those, but otherwise that's all I wanted to state.
Thank you.
This is Alder Slowinski.
Yes, sir. Go
I
ahead.
would move approval of the award of the 2021 street improvement projects to 21-01 to Gerke Excavating in the amount not to exceed $7,175,149.71. And if there's a second, I will comment.
Thank you. Is there a second? I'll second. All right.
So I just wanted to. I was very surprised to see Gerke. I've worked with Gerke for several years on my full-time position, and they're a very reputable company, very good company. They're actually based out of Toma, not Tomahawk, but they are a very reputable company. And unfortunately, I wish we could award it to a more local company, but they definitely are capable of doing the work. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Slawinski. Alder Shore.
Thank you, Mayor. The comptroller treasurer has trained us, or at least trained me, to watch the trends in street construction prices closely. So taking all the points about this being a larger project, whatever the standard measure is, if we could have a report on what these bids tell us about the scary escalation in costs that have been scaring us.
Thank you, Alder. I will ask the director to do that and present that to the alders, maybe even at council. Any more comments relating to this bid? Hearing none, alderpersons and committee members, please unmute yourselves. And if you are in favor of this, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Bid is approved. Item number 3 is to award the 2021 road resurfacing project 21-02 to Merrill Gravel and Construction Company in the amount not to exceed $1,495,288.89. Director, anything to add here?
I think this one summarizes it fairly well in the memo. This is a much smaller project. This is an industrial park, just resurfacing for that project. So,
thank you. Committee members, what are your wishes? Don't all jump at once.
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Comptroller Laddick. Is there a second?
Alder Nebun will second.
Thank you. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none. Board members, please unmute yourselves, and if you're in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that bid is approved. Item number 4 is to approve the ordinance amendments in section 9.05 as it relates to parking. Director?
just a couple of things with this one here for the month. The first one that we always have here related to Roger Street was just some observations and concerns between the police department as well as Public Works related to how people are able to navigate the left turn there from Main Street onto Roger Street, and thought it would be more appropriate to give them a little more space by moving the no parking a little bit farther down south on the roadway. But to accomplish that, we had to kind of adjust the ordinances a little bit. So it looks more than there is, but really it's just in order to gain a little bit more space there to give vehicular traffic, room to complete that turning movement there. So that's really the intent of that one. And the other one related to carrier parking is just, it doesn't seem to be necessary, anymore to have exclusive carrier parking. Always seems to be spaces there. So we're just cleaning that up as well. But that's all we have for this one.
Thank you. Alder Jennings.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Comptroller Laddick.
Seconded by Laddick. Discussion? Hearing, there we go. Ginger Keemer.
Yeah, this is Ginger Keemer, 1816 Lincoln Avenue. I just have a question. Assuming that these changes are approved for Rogers and East, will the residents be notified of these changes, or will the changes just be posted publicly somewhere? Thank you.
Absolutely. So the notices will be posted publicly, just like they were in the agenda here. Director, I don't think we have ever done any sort of notification to the neighborhood regarding parking changes.
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
So Alderperson-elect, if you would like to make that request, we could certainly work on that, or the alderperson for the area could contact the residents if they'd like. But typically, in a matter of parking changes, we do not send out a broad notification of to the neighborhood.
That's fine. There's no formal request. I was just curious how that worked.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, unmute yourselves and signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, those changes are approved. Item number 5 is to approve the ordinance creation in Chapter 9, Section 9.19 as it relates to ATV UTVs. As you probably have heard, there's been a lot of discussion in our surrounding municipalities since the state changed the law and allowed municipalities to determine whether or not they wanted ATV UTV use on their roads that are 35 miles an hour or less. Most of the surrounding municipalities, if not all, have done so. And I know that we have been very cognizant of transportation equity. This request came through Alderperson Slawinski, along with a couple of other citizens. So Alder Slawinski, I will turn the floor over to you for explanation. He may be having some difficulty with the.
All right, are you there now?
Yeah, we're good now.
Right when I want to start talking, everything locks up. So, yeah, like the mayor had stated, I have been contacted by several people in the community, basically requesting that we begin to allow ATV, UTV traffic on some of our outlying roads. More specifically, the requests that I've heard were on the Burlesque corridor. Again, like the mayor had stated, several municipalities surrounding Stevens Point, as well as the county, has moved ahead with ordinances allowing this type of activity on our roadways. And again, looking for transportation equity here. And I do strongly believe that by allowing this to move forward, that we're nothing but improving economic development, helping our businesses in the surrounding in outer areas of our city for additional revenues. I guess if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Alder Slawinski. And as you pointed out to me earlier, we did a disservice. There is a section of North Burlesque Road that is half of the road is in the city of Stevens Point, half of the road is in the town of Hull, and then a further section north. Depending on how things go with this request, I would ask that those sections also be included in the ordinance. I can share a screen with a map if anybody has questions about where exactly that is. Alder Jennings.
Yeah, thank you. I have no opinion on this one way or the other because the alder who brought this forward provided no information to council or the public. I recommend postponing this discussion until information is provided to council and to the public based on research about this issue, background, rationale, and impacts of the ordinance. I think it's highly unusual that just an ordinance come forward with no memo, no information whatsoever. And I would assume anyone, particularly council members proposing legislation, would take the time to do that and take responsibility for the ordinance itself. So I would like to motion to postpone discussion until we have further information from the alder who brought this forward, please.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Cindy Nabel, District 3, I would like to second that.
Thank you. So before we vote on this, I need to make some clarifications. There is information in your packet, including the ordinance and maps. Just like we did with the parking ordinance, there wasn't a memo from Director Badoon discussing the parking ordinance change. It's the actual ordinance. The same with the zoning code rewrite and almost every other thing that we've done. To say there's not information in the packet is wrong. There is information in the packet, and I don't want to give anyone from the public the impression that we were not providing information. So I want to be very, very clear on that. The discussions that were had were brought forward and discussed internally with the police department, the streets department, even had discussions with the town of Hull and a representative from the town of Lidwood in this regard. So if there are questions that you have of Alder Slawinski or myself or the police department, now would be the appropriate time to ask. Alder Nabel. Yeah, you're on mute.
Thank you. Didn't hit it hard enough. My question would be that I would hope that we would have this at an age where everybody was a licensed driver. That's my biggest concern. And that's where I think why it came across that we didn't have all the information, because there were not stipulations on certain things that I would think would need to be involved in this for safety, for certain age. I think having someone that has a valid driver's license is a big difference to somebody that has taken a course but then can have an adult with them on another vehicle, and it would be okay for them to be riding on a roadway of any sort with a vehicle like this.
Understood, Alder. And we had talked about that, and I'll let Attorney Beveridge chime in. Those guidelines are dictated by the state. Right now, you do not need a driver's license. Even someone my age, a little over 50, I don't need a driver's license to operate a ATV or UTV. The guidelines in the state are defined, and that's why we thought it wasn't necessary to put it in the ordinance, because the state, of course, would supersede that. We cannot make it looser. We can only make it more restrictive. Attorney Beveridge, anything to add?
We can make it more restrictive, though.
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually a little bit of an oddball part of the statute. So normally you'd expect that rules of the road would be governed under the chapters that normally discuss traffic enforcement, chapter 346, everything is included in there about driving. And then you've got chapter 343 is driver's licenses and all that. Everything related to ATVs is actually contained in chapter 23, which is the conservation chapter. And I guess the thinking there was, typically there's going to be operated on trails. So we'll assign all the everything under the ATV umbrella goes to the DNR. So you've got a little bit of a kind of a different way of regulating things. So with regards specifically to qualifications, age, I can certainly gather all the information there is available, the actual statutory references in time for council meeting. And I can send those out to everybody so that you have those ahead of time.
Alder Nabel, go ahead.
Thank you. I did look up all these, and I did look it up through the DNR pamphlet they had, and also through the state. And my point is that, yes, the state does not require it, but the state also doesn't really approve. It's up to the municipalities and the counties if they're going to allow for these vehicles to be on the road, and they do not recommend them to be on the road, number one, on any roadway or shoulder or ditch area. And they also, like you just said a minute ago, that it can be required that a certain age, it can be a more strict requirement than what it's up to the city. And that's why I brought it up as being an age of at least 16 to be allowed to do this.
I have a point of order.
Okay, what's your point of order?
My motion was to postpone discussion until further information was provided by the alder who brought this forward.
Yep.
And apparently there was all kinds of discussion that went on with staff that none of that is was made available to council or the public.
Okay.
It's my motion, it was seconded, and yet the discussion is continuing on.
It is.
Despite that.
That is in order. The discussion regarding the motion or any other failing the motion, approving the motion is very much in order. So the discussion that we're having right now is, again, in order. Alder Slawinski, you had something you wish to say?
Yeah, Alder Jennings, just because you don't want to talk about this doesn't mean you're going to bully everyone else not to talk about it. But I guess I just want to make it clear that whatever we do move forward with, that we mirror the other municipalities, just to keep it more uniform. And that it seems to be that's what the other townships are doing, is they're kind of working together and making sure that it's uniform, just so that there's no confusion, I guess, as you're crossing municipal lines. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Alder Nabel, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mayor. I've discussed it already, and I'd like to ask the Chief Zenner, interim Chief Zenner, his views on the age appropriateness for being on the road for this type of vehicles.
Hello, it'd be the recommendation of the police department, if operating on a roadway within the city, that it be a licensed driver, valid driver's license.
Alder Nabel, would you like to add an amendment to that?
No, that's what I would expect, that I would rather see, if we're going to have something like this, that it should be that a licensed person is able to drive, not someone that is not a driver's license for a roadway.
So you would want that as an amendment?
I agree with Chief Zenner.
If you would like to make an amendment to the proposed ordinance, now is the time.
Except that you have, point of order, you do have a motion on the floor, Mr. Mayor.
We do, and we're discussing that motion. We are discussing.
Right, but it's inappropriate. Excuse me, it's inappropriate to ask for a second amendment. You should vote on the first amendment.
There is no first amendment.
There is a motion on the floor.
There is a motion on the floor. There is not an amendment on the floor. An amendment is very much in order if the alders so choose. If they don't want to do it, that's up to them. I am merely extending the offer. Again, Alder Nabel.
I had said that I would second that we pull this and get some more information to make the decision.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Alder Kneebone.
I'm neutral on this right now, and I know that on Burlesky Road, that will go right by my street. But I really, the issue I have, we've been talking about overnight parking since last July. And we're only now getting an ordinance to vote on. I think this was brought forward extremely rapidly. I spent a lot of time today looking through the pamphlet, looking at the Wisconsin statute, and looking at a lot of information about how dangerous these vehicles are on the roadway. I'd like to have at least another month to get more information. I have no problem coming back next month and voting on this. I think that's only fair. It just seems like, you know, if we're going to really research things, you don't bring it already together and say, here it is, take it or leave it. I'd like to see more information about safety issues and that kind of stuff. And I would like to wait. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alder Jennings?
Yes, responding to Alder Slawinski. I was, as I said, I had no opinion on this. And I don't appreciate being called names in front of public. And I'll just restate that I think alders have an obligation to do some research and put pen to paper. And that's all I was asking. So to be called a bully for what should be professional behavior is very inappropriate. Just want to make that clear.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to take some parting comments because there's been a fair amount of some harsh criticism here. This was discussed. This was discussed, as I said, with the police department, with the surrounding municipalities, with the director of public works, with the city attorney. To say that there wasn't any research done really does a disservice to your staff. I want you to take a look at almost every other item that's on the agenda. How much research was done on that by the alders other than when you got your packet? We discuss every single item on every single agenda with your staff. Your staff are the experts that we've hired to provide that expert opinion. And when I hear that there was no research done, or this was brought forward quickly, it implies that your staff isn't doing their job. And I take offense to that because your staff is doing a fabulous job. Very dedicated every single day of the week doing that work. If you need more information on any topic, that is completely appropriate to ask for more information or ask for a postponement. But to accuse people of not providing any information when the information that is there is in your packet and waiting till the meeting to ask your questions does a disservice again to your staff. The motion on the floor is to postpone action for more information. The only information that I've heard is from Alderperson Kneebone, who asked for information relating to safety issues. Alder Nabel, do you have a comment?
Yes, sir, I do. Mayor, I just want to say that there was not a comment being that there was no information. There was not enough information that we have not, other alders have not been in the conversations with the other department heads. And if we are the deciding vote, it is our purpose is to make sure that we understand it completely. And when you get this on a Thursday night, to call people and start researching things, I really think it's important that we look at this a little longer. It's not saying anything to put down any person that brought this forward. It's to say that we feel if we're going to make a vote, we better darn well know what we're voting on and all parts to it. And if we don't, then we need to postpone.
I agree 100% with that alderperson, but the meeting's recorded and the comment was made that there was no information provided. You can go back and look at the video if you like.
Thank you.
Alder Slawinski, one final comment before we call the vote.
And again, when I brought this forward initially, I never expected to, have it dumped in our laps on a Thursday, talk about it Monday, the following Monday, approve it. I wanted that this is an item that I brought forward for discussion. If it takes a month, takes 2 months, 3 months, whatever it may be. I never was expecting anybody to get hammered through. But I don't appreciate where you want to just shut us down. We can't even talk about it. That's unprofessional. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, the motion is to postpone action. Again, the only information that was requested of staff is some safety issues from Alderperson Kneebone. If the motion maker or the second has additional information that they want staff to gather for them prior to the next meeting, I expect that we can get that either tonight or in an email tomorrow so staff can get working on that.
Okay.
Alder Nabel.
I'm sorry. As you said this, it made me think of what question I would want to find out. Talked about other municipalities because this is new stuff to me. So, please bear with me. I'm not a person that knows anything about these. So I did start reading up to that's what all I did today. But I do want to know, as Alder Kneebone had mentioned about safety, but also the safety of the difference of age and what do other municipalities have for, do they have a requirement of 16 or licensed person that is driving the vehicle? Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. I am making notes, and I agree 100%. This is new to everybody because the state law recently changed. All right, and this goes for everybody, public, alders, whomever. If you have questions that you want clarified before we bring this back, we need to know what those are. The motion before you is to postpone action. All those in favor, please unmute yourselves and signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing no opposition, the action is postponed. We will take no action on this and we will bring it back at a later date. Item number 6 is to approve the ordinance amendment in section 9.05 as it relates to overnight parking. This one's a long time coming, as Alderperson Kneebone alluded to earlier. The information's before you. If you need any director or any member of staff to provide some sort of narrative or background, please let me know. But otherwise, I'm not going to waste our time in rehashing all of this. I think we've got a pretty good product in front of us. Any member of the committee, Alder Nabel?
Sorry, I wasn't ready because I thought you're going to go with the committee first, and I'm not the committee. Thank you, Alder, for District 3. I do have a couple questions. One is about enforcement. My biggest concern about any of this, because I know it's going to happen, and we'll have to see what, the fallout is, either way, and we can always change things later. I understand that. My biggest concern is for residents on a couple of things. One is the enforcement, that we have that it will not fall on the shoulders of the residents to have to do it like many times we've done with ordinances. It's had to be where you've noticed that you have to call it in because they can't get it for everyone. But right now, I'm not sure what our staff is for parking enforcement. We already have 1 hour between 6 and 7 a.m. That's not covered at all. So our overnight parking time frame is from 2:30 to 6 a.m. and our paid parking in the areas around here start at 7 a.m. So we have an hour that's kind of left blank. That was one. Making sure that we have staff that'll be on so that when people are parking on the wrong side of the street, or when then you won't have it on both sides happening. It's important that we have that staff, and that's putting a lot on the police, to be able to do that. They can't do that with their police officers. They're supposed to be doing other things. They're not parking enforcement. So I'm hoping we have parking enforcement that will fill this. And I also noticed that we don't have any parking enforcement for weekends. From what I was told, it was going to be, they have, get me if I'm wrong, but one CFO from 7 to 11, another one from 10 to 2, another from 1 to 5, and then the fourth one would be the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And I'll ask Officer Zenner if I'm correct on that. And those that are on the 7 to 11 and 10 to 2 and 1 to 5 are Monday through Friday. Weekends are free parking. But what happens when the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., that's going to be Monday through Sunday that would need to be taken care of because of the switching over from odds to even. That was one of them. And the other thing that I'd like to just bring forward is that I like the idea that RVs would only be able to be parked on the streets, during that overnight time if they had gotten permission through the police department, because there's a reason. People do need to sometimes do that. They're there for a couple of days. Can understand that. At least then there's a definite time frame. It's not every night. But I would like to add that we put that same thing with the boats that are on trailers that are hitched to a car, or a trailer that's hitched to a car, to be the same way, because I think we're putting a lot on people or the police department for saying they can do it up to 3 days. That's going to be very difficult for them to be able to do. When you put a limit of a days, they could do the same kind of thing and go to the police station, say, we're doing this tear out or whatever, we're going to need to park a trailer in front of, in this area overnight, that can be done. And I think that's more where people are concerned about. Everybody's going to say they're going to pull their boats and trailers out and leave them on the street and put their cars in their driveways instead of having to pay to get, to put their boats or other things into a paid place to keep them, to store them, or if they don't have a place on their yard that they can do it. So those are the two big things or three big things that I have. And so I'd like to see that changed, at least, is that the vehicles that are boats with trailers and on a car and campers or any of those things, because a camper can be put in someone's driveway and their cars, the people's cars can be on the street.
Alderperson, would you like to make that amendment?
I would like to.
Wait, I'm sorry, you're not, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I'm not on there, that's right, sorry.
You're not on the committee.
Look at me talk.
So we can have a committee member make that amendment if any of them chose to do so.
And then if Officer Zenner could speak to the fact about.
I will have Chief Zenner speak to enforcement. We would enforce it just like any of our other ordinances, of course. But Chief Zenner, anything to add?
So quite a few questions there, so I'll wade through it and just deal with the enforcement. We do have enforcement over the weekend. It's not, we are staffed. We also have stand-ins that are on call in the event. We may have a day or two where the staff member or the parking enforcement takes a sick day or is out for an extended time. So we are adequately staffed, at least as of now.
Great, thank you.
Alder Nabel, I'm going to take it upon myself to offer the amendment. I will make a motion to amend the proposed ordinance to include pre-authorization for any trailers hitched to a licensed motor vehicle, and that same authorization. Is there a second? Is there a second there? Alder Jennings?
I'll second, and I also have amendment.
Thank you. Let's deal with one amendment at a time because that is a point of order. The amendment before you is allowing, putting the same restriction on trailers that are attached to a licensed vehicle. The discussion for now will have to remain for that item only. Is there any discussion on that proposed amendment? Nancy Roppy, I see your hand up. Do you have discussion on that amendment?
Actually, I do. If I recall correctly, you were very adamant that there weren't going to be any RVs and trailers and boats and all of this stuff parked on the street. And now you just made an amendment, made a motion to amend that to allow it. So, excuse me, Mayor, you are two-faced on this. Those things you said would not be on the street. And now you just went back on your word. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for clarification, an unhitched trailer is still not allowed at all for overnight parking. That's what the discussion item previously was. There will be no unhitched trailers for boats, campers, pop-ups, utility trailers, whatever it happens to be. That is not allowed. Any other discussion? Alder Kneebone.
Just to clarify, so basically what the amendment is saying is if I want to park I want to go fishing on Saturday and I want to go fishing on Sunday. So on Saturday night, I just want to park my boat and my car on the street so I can just drive off early in the morning. So if I get pre-approval from the police department to park on the right side of the street, that would be permitted with this amendment.
When you say right side, you mean correct side?
Yes.
I don't want to get people confused there either. It's still odd even. Alder, so that is my intention. I see Chief Zenner wishes to comment. Go ahead, Chief.
The one thing I would address, and the reason why we didn't initially put that, that was that very case. Obviously, that phone call would be coming into Lieutenant Williams. She works Monday through Friday. Our parking enforcement comes in if we're talking about pre-approval for boats attached to a vehicle, we may have some issues on that unless they want to call in 2-3 days beforehand. You know, I guess I would put that out there for consideration, which is why we listed it as they cannot park on the roadway for more than 3 consecutive nights.
Okay.
In the event that a request is made and no one answers that phone at the police department.
For clarification, Chief, how would that currently happen if the unamended ordinance was approved and I wanted to park an RV on the road? And Dana didn't answer, Lieutenant Williams didn't answer her phone.
Well, we don't have a whole lot of RVs that end up coming in, getting called in, but we do have a lot of boaters in the city of Stevens Point. And many of those boaters do take their boats out on the weekends. So as long as that boat was attached to a vehicle, if we have it on a roadway for 3 consecutive days, after that, obviously it's more than just a fishing trip on a weekend.
Sure.
That's the reason why we left it as 3 days.
Thank you. Alder Nabel, I saw your hand go up.
Sure. And I'm sorry, because the boat part came out was more, my thought was people to have trailers that have them attached. They can't be on the street as parking without a vehicle, correct? The trailer itself right now as is. So now it would be if they're going to have a trailer and they were doing work and they needed to have that trailer on the street because they're doing it 2 days in a row of something. That's the way I was looking at it more than it was thinking of boats. Again, somebody could hitch up their boat and their car on their driveway and put their car on the street. So I don't, you know, again, we're giving people such, making it so much easier for them that I can see where people get tired of, like it's every other weekend that they've got people parking with their boats out. You know, in our neighborhood, a gentleman that used to do it on Briggs Street just to take up 2 spaces because he was mad about all the college students parking in the neighborhood, would take his car and get his boat out, drag it out every day early in the morning. So before the students could park, and he would park that out there so that it was nobody parked in front of his house. So
thank you, Alder. I guess
nice memories, right?
it's possible. That's commitment. I'll give you that.
I'll tell you, you're right. So that's where I look at, you know, yes, there are people that will do that. So I guess I wasn't thinking fishing boats. I still think fishing boats can be in your driveway and you can still be ready to go.
Never park mine on the street overnight, that's for sure.
I wouldn't want to.
City Attorney, you had something to add?
Yeah, just briefly. So when I was talking to Chief Center about the 3 days, you know, the first thing that comes to mind with something like that is it would be onerous for enforcement staff to, oh, there's a boat, better put a tally down on the sheet for that for 1 day for this location. But that's not exactly how anything would need to work. What it would be is it would become very obvious if one had been left on the street for a number of days that is starting to become obnoxious. And the idea would be like that once everyone says, hey, this is a problem, that one hasn't moved in a while, it would be very obviously greater than 3 days at that point. So similarly to, you know, we have 25-mile-an-hour speed limits in town because we want to prevent people from going faster than 32 or so. So I think that ultimately the enforcement issue there would not be overly complicated in terms of record keeping. I think the number of egregious examples that we really want to enforce would be relatively small.
Thank you. Alder Nabel, one last time, please.
Sorry, one last time, and then I will stop completely. I hate to say it, but again, that's it brings back my point about where you put that responsibility on the residents to have to call it in, because you have different staff every other night, you know, working, and people that are gone. To keep that tally is cumbersome. And if you're allowing it, just like the RV, it's going to be where that has to be a complaint by a neighbor who doesn't want to get into a tiff with their neighbor over something like that. And we set up our neighbors. I don't like that. It's a really sad things are dangerous. I'll tell you, people are not as friendly and nice about things. So if they even think that you called it in on something, you find things happen. So I would just prefer that we just don't do that. We don't leave it on the onus on the residents, and also not for the police. The things change and they're not going to be always the same person seeing it. So just not have it on the street.
Thank you. And I think there's ways that we can work on enforcement, even if Lieutenant Williams isn't available and they have to leave a voicemail on Saturday morning. If there is a ticket, there's an appeal form online. Lieutenant Williams can see the date and time stamp on the voicemail and take appropriate action. Any other comments on the motion to amend? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Committee members, the motion is to amend the proposed ordinance to include a pre-approval or pre-authorization and 3-day limit on any trailer hitched to or connected to a motorized vehicle. All those in favor of the amendment, please unmute yourselves and signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. Alder Jennings, you had another amendment.
Yes, this is certainly the topic that I have received the most comments from my constituents on. And given those conversations, I want to propose the following amendment. It would state roughly overnight street parking on streets where parking is only allowed on one side of the street shall remain subject to the current permit rules. The justification for that is districts 1 and 3 are disproportionately impacted by this ordinance, and this ordinance isn't rectifying some of our issues, but when landlords or residents of rental properties, they will move out onto the streets at night without a charge. And so the concern is the number of cars that will be parked on the streets in vulnerable areas in the core of the city.
Alderperson, before I ask for a second, can you restate the proposed amendment again, please?
Yes, sir. Overnight street parking on streets where parking is only allowed on one side of the street shall remain subject to the current permit rules. In other words, there would be fee parking.
Okay. Well, because I think it's already covered, and City Attorney, I'm going to ask you to help clarify this. Under Section 3 of the 9.05, the sub 3, it says these rules do not replace more restrictive parking regulations in the city, including posted no parking zones, no parking restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. City Attorney, would this proposed amendment fall under that, or is this different?
I think there's one tiny addition to the amendment that'll clarify it. And obviously, Alderperson Jennings can correct me if I'm getting it wrong, but I think to make it a little more obvious what it means would be to say that overnight parking will not be allowed in places where parking is only allowed on one side during daytime hours.
Okay. So we have then clarification from the City Attorney. First of all, Alder Jennings, is that what you're trying to get at? Did the attorney state that correctly?
I think that will address the issues that have been presented to me.
Okay. So then I would ask for a second on that motion. Okay, Alder Kneebone, seconds.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Chief Zenner, you had a comment?
I'm just trying to clarify what that, were you indicating that in areas where there would be no parking on one side of the street, that no one would be able to park on that street other than a permit system?
No, I don't think that's what it is. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit too. And Alder Jennings, correct me if I'm wrong. I think what the Alder is saying and what I think is being proposed here is that if there is permit parking or kiosk parking during the day, but no restriction at night, that the permit would still be required on that side of the street. Does that make sense? First of all, am I explaining that right?
I think that deviates from the intent.
Okay, let's try one more time. Either Alder Jennings or the city attorney, because then I'm confused as well.
Attorney Beveridge, would you mind restating?
So so just the way that I was interpreting what you'd proposed was that you wanted there for places where you can only park on one side during the day. Obviously, you have a lot of those in the city center, that overnight would then be subject to the current permit system, by which I think the mayor, that sounded correct to me, where we have kiosk parking. But do you also mean in areas where it's parking only allowed on one side during the day, no kiosks in place for that area, but the overnight permitting system is currently in place?
That's correct.
Status quo, not the kiosk, but the generalized citywide permitting system.
Yes, thank you. And I understand, Mayor, that you were saying basically the same thing. I just wasn't getting.
Chief Zenner, do you understand that a little bit better now?
So are we referring to the city as a whole or the downtown area? Because the downtown area would be the only thing at this point which was being recommended to having any type of kiosk permit system. We would not have that per this recommendation on the citywide area. So I guess that's where my confusion's coming in.
And I agree. I don't know that maybe we need a little more work on this. Alder Jennings, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have an additional comment?
Well, this particular issue has nothing to do with kiosks. It's the parking on one side of the street and maintaining the $3 permit parking, because these particular areas will have a lot more people parking flooding the streets at night in areas that are already causing trouble.
And I think I misspoke on that too. I said kiosk, but I did mean the passport, because you can do it on an app, you can do it on the kiosk. Obtaining the overnight parking permit, is that, yeah. Chief Zenner, that would then be citywide.
Okay.
Alder Shore, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up relating to Alder Jennings' amendment.
Yeah, I have a question about a specific street that I think Chief Zenner will be familiar enough to help me with. I mean, overall, I think, you know, like just having.
I don't know where that's coming from. Is that you?
Yeah. Hang on a second. I mean, yeah, we got.
No. If there's background and it's you, that's completely okay. I don't see anyone else off of mute. We're good.
Okay, I can move.
That's quite all right. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't someone else.
Okay. I mean, overall, I don't really see the problem with people parking on the street, which is, you know, why I support this generally. But to home in on the issue here, I think the most pertinent street in my district would be Price. I'm pretty sure Price only has any parking on one side of the street. And so the question is, because that's the case, even before the amendment, would people not be able to park overnight on Price?
So
and what about, and you know, and then is it the amendment that makes it so? Okay, that's my question.
That's very specific. Now, I'm not familiar with Price enough. Is there no parking at any time on one side of Price? Alder Shore?
I think so.
And I see Director Badoon, he's looking, I'm assuming he's paging through the extensive 9.05 chapter, because there's a lot of parking ordinances. But to try and generally answer your question, if there is currently no parking allowed on one side of the street forever, that would still not be allowed. However, if it is a no parking from, let's say, 8 to 5, then Alder Jennings's amendment would allow overnight parking with a permit purchased either through a kiosk, online, or through the app.
Okay, thank you. That daytime versus ever.
Right. If there's a standard parking ordinance in effect, that still would remain in effect. But if it's timed, for example, no daytime parking, nighttime in this case would be allowed with the amendment with a permit, or it would be allowed without a permit without the amendment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand it better now.
Thank you. Alder Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I have my understanding of the amendment correct, I live on Church Street. It's a one-way. One side of the street you can't park on. One side you can. So would this be saying that to park on the side of the street that you can park on, you would need to pay a $3 permit? And if you were on the, and then, because I guess my original, when this proposal was brought last month, was that you would not be allowed to park on the side where you wouldn't be able, where there is no parking, and that then, so basically every other night you could park on Church Street where you can only park on one side. And I guess if there, so I guess I think my general thought on this amendment is that this proposal brought to us by staff who reviewed this and presented to us basically with their blessing, includes the blessing of being able to enforce this and for hopefully the public being able to understand that. And I think this amendment does a disservice to that, makes it more confusing for residents, and also makes it more difficult for the enforcement to be kept track of. So I guess I'm not supportive of it, but I would be open to further clarification.
Thank you, Alder Dalton, and I will try to clarify and answer your question. If there is no parking allowed on one side of the street ever, you would still not be allowed to park there overnight. There is no permit, no anything that would allow you to do that. However, if, as in Alder Shore's case, it was no parking from 8 to 5 and did not have a nighttime restriction already in place, this amendment would allow that with the purchase of a permit, or if the amendment fails, the ordinance as proposed would allow it without a permit. Does that answer your question, Alder Dalton?
Yes, and then my stance, and I would encourage the board to then not support this amendment, because I think that additional step of permitting would do a disservice to community members in trying to figure out what to do with parking their car.
Thank you. And Nancy Rappi, you had your hand up. Thank you for patiently waiting.
I support this amendment for the fact that Smith Street, Franklin Street, Briggs Street, all in the first district, have tremendous problems already with all of the cars that have been pushed off of the campus area because you put up kiosks there and required people to pay for parking that they can't afford. That's discriminatory. So what did they do? They all moved out further away from campus where they don't have to pay for parking.
Ms. Rappi, this is only in regards to overnight parking. Do you have a comment regarding the overnight parking?
And that's what I'm getting to.
Okay,
you know
please
what?
make your
You
point.
guys let that Oren guy talk endlessly, and you let Bob Ward talk endlessly, and now you're cutting me off, and I object to that.
I object to you not staying on topic, ma'am.
I am. The part about overnight parking is there's cars parked on these streets all day long. And if you allow overnight parking, they will be there all night long too. And that's the point of this amendment, so that it doesn't eliminate being able to park overnight, but you have to pay for it. And then that alleviates some of the problems that you're going to foist on the 1st and 3rd districts. And anybody who says, I don't think there's going to be a problem, needs to come and see what goes on in the 1st and 3rd district, because you're uninformed.
Thank you very much. Alder Dalton, your hand is up again. Did you have another comment?
Sorry, no, I just haven't unlowered it.
I'll lower it for you. There you go. Any other comments on the amendment? Alder Kneebone.
Yes. My understanding of the amendment was that if it's no parking on one side during the day, no overnight parking would be allowed on either side because the street would be too narrow. I don't think it's a good idea to start charging on certain streets and not other streets. I think that's going to be really tough on the enforcement angle. I don't have a problem if it's no parking on one side to not allow any overnight parking on that given street. I don't have a problem with that. I just don't like to see people have to pay differently. I'd rather see them not be allowed to park there at night at all. I'm also would not mind coming back to this in 6 months, asking the police department what kind of monsters may have been inadvertently created that we could then amend the ordinance to alleviate. I think had I realized this was going to be a paid thing, I probably wouldn't have seconded, but I think we need to let the motion or let the amendment go to a vote of the committee anyway, but
okay, thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, I do believe this is going to be a split vote, and it's much more difficult to tell who voted what in count via Zoom. So I would ask Tricia Church to call the roll. I'm going to restate the motion. The motion is to amend the ordinance to allow or require a permit for overnight parking on streets that currently have restrictions on daytime parking for no parking. And I summarized that a bit, but we've discussed it ad nauseum. So Tricia, members, if you are in favor, you'll vote yes. If you are opposed to the amendment, you'll vote no. Tricia, please call the roll.
Okay, Mayor Weezer.
No.
Slawinski.
Aye.
Kneebone.
no.
Laddick.
No.
Jennings.
Aye.
And then Morrow and Sarazu are not.
Mulder. Okay, I have 3 no's, 2
Three
yeses.
no's.
Is that correct?
Yep.
The amendment motion fails. We are now back to the original proposal as amended. Alder Kneebone.
I would move to approve the ordinance as amended.
Thank you. Do we have a second? I will second. Discussion. Nancy Roppy.
Nancy Roppy, 925 Smith Street. You're determined to foist upon the entire city yet another bad decision that will result in countless complaints and relentless warranted criticism. An unfortunate greed-based bad decision was made to allow development of properties beyond what the footprint of those properties can comfortably accommodate without requiring sufficient on-site parking. You'll try and fail to fix your last bad decision by compounding it. North Side Yard is a so-called underparked development. To alleviate the design flaw, you'll force the surrounding neighborhood to deal with all the problems that come with on-street parking. This is the same stupid mistake Wausau made and rescinded. Don't learn anything from others' obvious mistakes. Instead, plunge ahead down the same wrong path while giving slumlords another excuse to further overcrowd existing rentals. Equally disturbing is the police previously testified overnight parking was a nightmare when it was allowed in the past. But now we have a so-called staff recommendation to rely on to overcome previous testimony. Taxpayers pay staff substantial salaries with the expectation they'll give honest, expert opinions when asked, not capitulate to endless pressure from certain misguided alders. No matter what the mayor says, what staff did with this recommendation was dereliction of duty. They know snow plowing and street sweeping will be next to impossible. There has been no promise of enhanced parking enforcement, nor of quick problem resolution. Instead of standing up to pressure and telling truths that are hard for some alders to hear, they caved. It's beyond disappointing. And what's worse is the positively schizophrenic positions taken by the police department. First, they reject, then endorse overnight parking, then issue a March 29th press release advising of catalytic converter thefts, recommending parking in a garage. Where is the commitment from the street department that if it snows on the 5th, when cars are parked on the odd side of the street, preventing complete plowing on the odd side, that the plow will return on the 6th to completely plow the odd side? When that unplowed snow on the odd side has frozen solid in the interim, where is the promise of an extra effort to clear it? I pay the same taxes as the homeowners on the even side of the street where parking is not allowed. I deserve the same quality of snow removal and street sweeping. But when this overnight parking change takes place, I'll be getting second-class citizen treatment. The public was originally told this overnight parking change was to help out a couple of teenagers. Then we learned about the underparked developments. We were intentionally misled. In the interest of full disclosure and transparency, maybe before you vote on this, alders that have a personal interest in parking trailers or their boyfriend's trailers on the street should come clean.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rappi. Any other discussion? Alder Kneebone?
I have a garden trailer and I keep it in my garage.
Thank you, Alder Kneebone. Any other discussion? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the ordinance as amended. If you're in favor, vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. And I will have Tricia Church call the roll one more time.
All right, Mayor Weeza.
Aye.
Slawinski.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Laddick.
Aye.
And Jennings.
No.
4-1, the motion is approved. That will go forward to council next Monday. And with that, our agenda is exhausted. We are adjourned to finance. Comptroller, as I mentioned to you earlier, I had an 8 o'clock appointment. I will be turning over control to you.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.